Hiya, my name is Jess and welcome to my channel. Have a look at this. Today I'm going to be filming for you my August 2016 monthly wrap-up video. In the month of August I read 5 books, 2 plays and 1 short story, which I don't think's bad going. I've just noticed that because of where my hair is, it looks like I'm not wearing anything on the top half. I am wearing something. This isn't that sort of channel. Anyway, without further ado, let's just get into the first book. And the first book I read in the month of August was The Rosie Project by Graham Simpson. The Rosie Project follows a genetics professor called Don Tillman who, after a series of very unsuccessful dates, decides that he will select his future spouse by making a quiz and then judging the women that he may potentially date so he knows if they'll be suitable for him, and this is something that he calls the Wife Project. Things get a little bit more complicated when a young woman called Rosie enters the equation, who is searching for her father and wants the genetics professor Don to assist her. This book was unbelievably charming and endearing, and it's one of the few rom-com books that I've read that have really made me actually physically laugh out loud, which is something that I don't really come across often. Don is a very factual person, he's very reserved, he's not the sort of person that you think would be funny, but the way that he sees things and the way that he interacts with people is just so comedic and wonderful. What I really loved about this book though was its originality. I do feel like sometimes that sort of rom-com formula can feel really repetitive, but everything that Graham Simpson was writing in this book just felt really fresh and new, and whilst the plot could be a little bit predictable at times, that didn't mean that I enjoyed it any less. This book was on holiday and I think it's a brilliant holiday read. It is heartwarming, it's funny and it's rewarding when you finish, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next I read A Doll's House, a play by Henrik Ibsen. That yellow is so bright on the camera, it makes me look like a ghost. This is a play set in Victorian era Norway, which follows the married couple Nora and Torvald. I find that name really hard to say. Torvald. What sort of cruel parent do you have to be to name your child Torvald? Anyway, it follows married couple Nora and Torvald Helmer as their marriage slowly begins to disintegrate when secrets are uncovered. This play was so gripping, and what I loved about it was the way that Ibsen slowly pulled layers back. You start with this married couple who are kind of perfect on paper, they're picture perfect. They look and sound and act like the ideal Victorian married couple should have done. As the play progresses, all of these layers are slowly peeled back and things become more fraught and secretive and dark and wonderful. I absolutely loved it. I felt like Henrik Ibsen was just taking every single stereotype about Victorian marriage and women that you'd ever heard and just was tearing it to pieces. It's a really good one to start with if you sort of want to get into reading more plays, because I feel like anyone could pick this up and get into it quite easily, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next books I read were To All the Boys I Loved Before and P.S. I Still Love You, which are the first 2 books in what is soon to be Jenny Han's trilogy. This book follows Lara Jean, who for every boy she has ever loved or had a crush on, she writes a letter. And these letters are never intended to be sent there solely for her. She writes them, she gets all of her feelings out, and then she seals them and puts them in a hat box. They're her way of getting closure, really. However, one day she discovers that all 5 letters have been sent out, and what complicates things even further is that one of those letters has been sent to her sister's very recently ex-boyfriend Josh. These books were absolutely adorable. I say in my main review that for me they felt very much in the vein of early 2000s teen comedies like She's All That, 10 Things I Hate About You. They had that similar sort of cutesy, warm, funny, genuine vibe to them that I really loved. I also loved the family element of this book. Lara Jean is one of 3 sisters and the way that they bounce off each other was super interesting to see. I also really loved the way that Jenny Han writes. It's a very sort of light writing style, but she still manages to touch on very serious topics such as diversity and slut shaming without coming across too preachy. There were some issues I had in both books. I feel like in both the endings came about too abruptly. I also feel like we were missing some character development in places where I'd have liked to have seen a little bit more. Generally, I thoroughly enjoyed them. I gave the first book in the series, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, 4 stars, and I gave it a sequel, P.S. I Still Love You, 3.5 stars. Next, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. So Rebecca is the story of a young woman whose name we never actually find out, who is travelling as a paid companion of an older woman in Europe, where she meets the very mysterious and recently widowed Maxim de Winter. Mr. de Winter is very famous for owning a huge English estate known as Manderley, and also because of the the tragic circumstances under which his wife Rebecca has recently died. Our narrator falls in love with Maxim but struggles upon coming to manly with him as she feels like the entire place continues to be haunted by the presence of Rebecca. This is another book that I've already made a review for, and I will also leave that link down below in the description doobly-doo box thing. But I will say that what this book does incredibly well is atmosphere. You can really sort of tell that she's taken inspiration from a lot of gothic novels. There's this certain heaviness and eerie quality about it that's just absolutely brilliant. You really feel that you as a reader are being haunted by Rebecca right along with the narrator. Her presence is in every page, and the suspense that comes from that is just insane. It is a bit of a slow mover. For the entire sort of middle chunk, not really that much happens. So if you're going to read this one, you do have to kind of be willing to wait it out and wait for all those plot threads to slowly come together. But when they do come together, it's absolutely brilliant. And I gave this book a rating of 4.5 stars. Next is one of the two books that are tied as my favourite reads of this month, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. The Raven Boys follows a young girl called Blue who comes from a family of psychics but is not actually a psychic herself. However, for her whole life, she has been told by her psychic family that if she meets her true love and she kisses him, he will die. Blue's path is slowly entwined with that of three boys who attend the local private school, Aglyonby Academy, Raven Boys. And these three boys are on a quest to try and raise a dead Welsh king who they believe is buried somewhere around Blue's little Virginia town. As legend has it, whoever wakes the king will be granted a favour. I am so late to the party for this series, but I'm really glad that I finally picked this one up. Maggie Stiefvater's strength definitely lies in her characters. Every single character in this book just felt so fleshed out and real. You really get a sense that she knows her characters inside out, and because of that, watching them interact with each other and getting to notice all their little quirks was just so rewarding. Also, the main plot thread of this book revolves around Welsh mythology, which is something that I really don't think you see very often, but I found really interesting. However, this is definitely more a character-driven story than a plot-driven story, and I really enjoy that because I feel like you don't see that much character-driven fantasy, especially not character-driven paranormal fantasy, which is where I would personally say this book falls. Again, with this book, the atmosphere, the eerie, magical, strange otherness of the atmosphere was just so brilliantly realised, and Maggie Stiefvater's writing style was absolutely gorgeous. It's just magic. I absolutely loved this book and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Next up this month, I read a short story which is Breakfast at Tiffanys by Truman Capote. This book follows a young novelist living in New York called Paul and his relationship with a young woman named Holly Golightly. And as Holly Golightly is pretty much one of the original Manic Pixie Dream Girls, the relationship that blossoms is a very strange and confusing one. I did quite enjoy this short story. I feel like Truman Capote's strength sort of lies within his dialogue. You really got a sense of the character of Holly best through her dialogue. I think she would have pages of just kind of nattering, and it really gave you kind of a good insight into the way that she presents herself, if that makes sense. I also think that he conveyed the sort of madness and the rush of 1940s New York really well. That was also one of my favourite aspects of the book. I do wish that our narrator Paul had kind of had more of a presence. He felt kind of flavourless, if you know what I mean, just when compared to Holly, who completely just took over the story and made it her own. If I'm honest, I don't think I'm much of a short story person. I feel like for me, when this story ended, I felt like it should have just been starting. I don't know, whenever I read a short story, I always find myself wanting like another 100 pages. I really wanted to get more closure with the character of Holly than we did. She reminded me a lot of Margot from Paper Towns. So yeah, I did enjoy it, but it definitely wasn't my favourite read of the month, and I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the second of my two favourite reads this month was The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. The Importance of Being Earnest follows two thoroughly middle-class young men who both set their sights on two women who unfortunately will only marry someone who is named Ernest. It is pretty much as weird as it sounds. It quite clearly mocks the upper classes, but it does it in a way that's just so light-hearted and jovial. It doesn't feel like super serious satire, if you know what I mean. The dialogue was just like sarcasm with a smile, if that makes any sense, and it was so funny. The humour was just absolutely perfect for the story that he was trying to tell. At least the story that I think he was trying to tell. So I absolutely adored it. I gave it 5 stars and it has made me really want to pick up Oscar Wilde's works in future. So there you have it. That was my super eclectic August wrap up. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye.